Luca, how's it going? I'm very excited to take a look at your second pass here, or second pass from me at least. This is great. It looks so fun, and I'm happy you've submitted again, and we can so that today we can talk about even more polishy stuff. And I think it's mostly going to be praising you because this looks really very nice. And we're going to go into detail again about everything, but I just want to start off by saying, just playing this, um, watching it feels so alive and so energetic. And you had energy in your last pass, but the huge difference now is that he feels so much more alive. And like there's nothing really when I play it that distracts me. There's one little timing thing that I'm going to mention that watching it overall that stood out to me, but it's even that is subtle, but it just has a really nice spark. Just watching it, it's so fun and it's so playful. And by you going in there and adjusting so many little details, polishing spacing, cleaning up the feet so that they physically make more sense, adding more realistic wing motion in there, loosening up the tail, making sure that not everything hits poses at the same time. To me, that makes a huge difference. Even playing it at speed, and when I played it at speed last time, it was reading nicely, that like it wasn't broken, but now I can feel it. It's so much more fleshed out. And framing through it reveals even more of what you did, but it totally shows when you play it at speed as well. And you've improved some poses as well, so even it reads better and clearer in some places. So that's really great. Let me quickly check your notes here. You said you tried to improve the wings, which you did, and the flapping, but it's very difficult. Yes, it is. Um, you know, Even with really, really good rigs, like on the Dragon movies, we had very good rigs. And just to briefly mention this, we could not have done those movies and all the footage we had to do if there hadn't been a really good flight setup. So just to give you a rough idea, the wings, the wing flaps on those dragons were pre-animated so that every dragon had a specific unique wing flap. And then Rigging had built a system into these characters where you could control those wing movements with a few simple curves, right? For the speed, for the strength of the flap. So for example, for the character that I supervised on the third Dragon movie, I animated 3, and this was done for all the dragons, but this is the only one I did it for. We animated 3 different flap cycles: a weak one, sort of a medium standard one, and a really strong flap. And then the system could blend in between those. This is just like this is not really a secret, but it's just a rough idea of how you can help animators by putting some automation into a character, because as you've noticed here, animating every wing flap from scratch, it's such a complicated movement with so many moving parts that it just takes a really long time to make those very, very nice. And we still had to animate over for like things like asymmetry, or for intersections with the body, or for specific shapes relative to camera. There was still a lot of hand tweaking, but at least you had the basic flapping kind of already built in. So those are some things, to make animators' lives a little bit easier. There's still the whole rest of the dragon to animate. But yes, wing movement is complicated, and you did a great job overall making this work. There are some suggestions that I have here and there, but it can't be overstated. It looks deceivingly simple when you did it well, and when the wings are just working. But even even them just coming along, overlapping with him jumping around, because I remember this very well. On these characters, they are quadrupeds, right? So they have the hips and shoulders going, like bouncing around at different timings. But the wings, they're sort of in between the hips and shoulders. So they are affected by both, right? So the webbing goes from the shoulder all the way to the hips. And these long wing fingers, when they're folded, they go back, if it's bigger wings, they go even into back to the tail. So if you have those walks and hops and things, it's really hard even just animating the wings coming along for the ride and overlapping nicely, even though nobody would even think about that when you see the dragon move around. So, I totally get it. And I think you did a really nice job cleaning all this stuff up, getting some more graphic shapes, having, like we talked about here, having a little bit more overlap, getting clear shapes on them. That's all really nice. And here, much better actual, like proper wing poses. They are much, much nicer. And now I believe that it's actually a proper flap. And here I can see that you studied a little bit more how these wings actually, how the upbeat works for the wings, how they come out, how they fold close to the body, and then they come up and then they almost wrap around the air and flap down again, which the worst thing people do when animating birds is that the wings go down and they kind of go up the same way, which couldn't be further from the truth. And it doesn't make sense physically, but if you don't really think about it, or if you don't really study it, you just kind of do this, which is like the worst. And then, some people at least get the idea that they have to fold on the way up and then extend again. But it's actually more complicated than that, because the wing slightly flaps forward on the way down. So there's like a forward arc on the way down. And on the way back, they fold together and they kind of get pushed back and then wrap around the air with the least amount of resistance, and then they come down again. And with birds, it's actually cool because when they do the upbeat, they even what's the word for that? I don't know. They like split their feathers so that air can go through, that it's even less air resistance. And then on the way down, it's a whole closed wing, like they're all closed again so that they can push the air. So there's a lot of really cool stuff going on with these kind of webbed wings. It's a little different, where the webs kind of just collapse between the wing fingers. And you did a really nice job with that. I think the poses are pretty clear. I like here how they come down. These are all nice poses. So we're going to talk about the wings a little more in detail, but I just wanted to point out, because you noted, it's very difficult, and completely. When you've done it well, it looks effortless and elegant, and people don't even question the physics. They're just, the wings are just like coming along, they're flapping, and it looks really nice and powerful or elegant or cool. But it's a lot of work. And the bigger those wings are, the more joints you have to work with and the more shaping you have to do, so and to me, the characters that are quadrupeds plus wings, like a Pegasus or a dragon or a griffin, those are extra tricky because of that quadruped body that is affecting the wings on both ends. Because a bird, has a fairly stiff, like bullet-shaped body, where the wings are attached at the shoulder, like at the front big part of the body, and it doesn't deform as much as with a quadruped, so it's a little easier. Okay, you also say you're not sure if the double flapping at 200 works. Let me check that really quick. 200 to 220. So here, I think it does. There are some detail things that I'll mention there, but I think the idea is nice. Flap, flap. Yeah, it's a little bit messy, I guess. Where you could simplify a few things because you have the flap here, and then here the wings kind of lock a little bit in place. Oh, I didn't want green. Let's do white. So here, for me, the wings, they like freeze for a moment here, and then they keep going up. And here the upbeat actually doesn't quite work. So here, I wish that you did a proper like bird-like upbeat where it's a little bit more. This is going to be very hard to draw, but here's the web. It's a little bit more like that, I think, where the wing hand is higher, and then this kind of drags down. If you web, this doesn't look quite correct, but you know, check out some birds. I'm sure you have reference. Because they don't tilt the back of the wing up. You know, it's always you have the down flap, and then it's kind of it's this idea. And on the way up, the tips of the wings or the ends of the wings usually drag down. So I think this could be a nicer. These drawings are not quite correct. But it's hard to draw from this angle. And then, you know, when the wings do the upbeat, and then at the very end they extend and kind of wrap around. So I think these poses could be nicer, and I wouldn't necessarily pause here. Like these couple frames, see here, this wing, it flaps down, which is nice. And I like this, that this is kind of a smaller flap. See, and here you're starting to right idea. You're starting this here, sorry, it's getting messy. This starts to come up and this starts to drag. And you have to continue that so that the wing hand comes up and wraps around, you know, and this back part drags and then folds and then kind of pops out at the top and extends again. So this section here, I would tweak. Same with this side, you know, these spikes, they would all still be down, kind of like, more like that. Because on the way up, you want to compress the wing to have less air resistance. And here, this looks pretty good, the extension. You can probably get a little bit more volume like that. So that to make this shape a little cleaner. You know, same on this side. Ideally, this would be a little more. It would just be a large shape because you basically, it's like if you imagine a parachute, you know, you kind of, it comes up and it goes woof, it fills with air, and then you can use it for lift. It's probably not physically accurate description, but and here too, see how if it's possible to get more wing foil with this as well, to have more area, more like surface area visible, that would be nicer, right? So that these are nice and big on the way down. Yeah, and here ideally this would be filled with air, right? So that it looks like the air actually fills it. See? Same here. And if you can curve these like that, See, you can already feel that this is filled with air. See that? These shapes are what I'm looking for. So that you have this kind of idea. And sometimes it's easier with some rigs than others. This is a little bit easier to make work. And then this is cool. Yeah, on things like that, you can exaggerate the drag on these, where you can reverse these spikes. You still want the airfoil a little bit, like the curvature of but the tips, they are very flexible and bendy. So these guys can nicely drag. Coming from here, see, they're dragging where they came from to give that extra bit of looseness at the end of the wings. Because you want the middle of the wings, or the structural part, is kind of firm, because that has to make the character fly and hold it up in the air. But these tips, they are bendy. I think we call them spikes on dragons. And here you have a few poses where the wing gets too thin, where you can try and get the volume back to always have this surface, so that the wing never has these really paper thin areas. And here I would probably, if you have this, I would probably take this skin and bend it down so that you see a little bit of you have more area here, and then the underside appears there. Something like that. You also get this webbing down. Okay, let's actually go back to the beginning. I got carried away with I could talk about wings for hours, it's just so much fun. But like you said, ton of work. So I do think that the double flapping of the wings work here, but you can clean it up and make some more accurate and also nicer shapes. And then I also always try to track the arcs of like the wing hand. That's an important point. And also sort of the outer end of the wing, that's also something, this one here, it's also something where you can arc track and spacing track, because that kind of pops around. See how let me use a different color. It's here, and then it goes here, and then boom, now all of a sudden it's here, and then it goes up, it's somewhere up there. So it kind of has a little bit of a weird arc. So those things you can just keep track of, which is tricky. And on the way down, by the way, so in poses like that, you did it here, I like this, you can exaggerate that. On the other wing too, it'd be nice to see the outer finger reverse, and maybe even some of these ones, where if you draw the curvature, it would be like whoop. And this is because it's pushing down, but these spikes at the end, they're so flexible that they actually get reversed by the air pressure, and that makes for really interesting shapes. Here too, you can really drag these tips. Same on the other side, and then you get more elegant shapes. Instead of that shape, you get something more like, well, this. Let me actually draw over the wing. It's gonna make more sense. Let me find an example. Like on a pose like that, they would drag down because the wing's moving up, and then when the wing reverses, and flaps down, you know, that's when you have the spikes going in the opposite direction, because that's the softest part of the wing. Cool. Okay. You say you also fixed the feet. You did. Yes, I noticed a lot of differences there. That's great. And the other things I mentioned in the first review. So let me quickly, you know, address the feet. I think it just looks a lot more lizardy, creaturey, dragony, the way you pose those legs. You know, these poses, the way you pose them is just so much nicer and looks more appealing. It looks less stiff, and it just looks more like an animal to me. So really nice job with that. And I noticed, you know, on the steps here, I see the pronation, supination, whichever way, I can never remember, you know, that the hand twists inward. I like that you've animated the fingers too. So I think the beginning works great. The one thing I would say is that now the tail is probably almost a little too soft, that it almost draws attention to itself, where it's a little too loose and maybe too slow. I like what it's doing, but like it's almost a little too snaky, or like it feels a little bit underwater, which it's not necessarily a problem, but because now it comes up as the dragon actually is sort of hitting its pose, and then the tail is doing this whole extra action, which you could probably find some in between where the tail doesn't distract from, because we're supposed to look at this, right? So I think you can probably maybe get the tail there 2 or 3 frames earlier and find some middle ground, and then maybe have it settle maybe a little bit faster. I don't know. I'm just saying that because the tail is literally the only thing moving there, and it's kind of a big movement when the dragon is just sort of looking and sniffing. So maybe you can calm it down a bit, but it also works the way you have it. Here, I think you can do a little bit of cleanup to the tail. See how when you step through this slowly, the tail kind of, it's still, and then it moves with the dragon here, and then it's freezing for a frame or so, and then it moves again, and then it's stuck for a frame again, and then it's moving, and then stuck and moving and stuck. So I think there's just a little bit of cleanup to do, that the tail doesn't do staccato things. And I know this is tricky, especially if you have it in FK. You have to counter all these little moves from the body and stuff, but this, you know, this is not connected to this body. Like, it's so far away in terms of joint chain that it should move pretty independently, and it shouldn't like jitter when the body does something. So it's just a bit of cleanup work to do there to iron out those little pops and make sure that the tail does what it needs to do. You know, or things like here where the tail kind of pops up in the same shape. So you have a pretty big movement where this mass of the tail moves up a lot. That in that case, the top of the tail should still be dragging. You know, if you have a big movement down here, then you have to sort of counter that this top part isn't moving yet. You know, so you have the effect of, it's like that. And now what you're doing is this. Okay, so the bottom moves and it pulls the top along, but it should do that, and then, you know, there's a delay where the rest of the tail gets dragged as well. So there's some little spacing things. It doesn't really stand out in motion, I have to say, but, you know, or you have little things where the tail kind of, the base of the tail kind of hits a pose here, and then it stays in the same place, and then boom, it moves a lot again in the next frame. So you can probably adjust the spacing there, that it's not freezing for a frame, just keeps moving for a bit more. But these are like really subtle things that don't really stand out. when you watch it at speed. Like what, you know, and all the head and the face stuff is nice. I was thinking that maybe here the head maybe freezes a little too much, but it's probably fine. I can't see this from the side, but I assume that here his head is also forward, right? So make sure that when you see him from the side and you have his chest, I would imagine this pose to look like that, you know, with the so it'd be wrong if his head was here, and then it would just kind of translate up. So when, you know, and when it raises his head, then he would kind of look like that, right? So that the length of the tail, the length of the neck is somewhat consistent because it comes up here. So I can't quite tell if the neck is really short in this pose, but probably you did it right. And the curvature of the neck works nicely, I think. We had talked about that. This is much, much nicer. It feels a lot more like a creature with that curvature in the neck. Cool. Yeah, this is all nice. I like that you polished the take a little bit where it doesn't quite hit as hard in the mouth. The tongue comes out. That's really cute. So I was thinking that the head is freezing a little too much down here in that pose, and then it pops up. I think I like that the body is still, but I would probably have the head follow through a little bit more, where here, see, in these 1, 2, 3 frames, the head almost doesn't change. And you can do a few things. I would probably have the eyes start to go up a little bit in the direction he wants to jump, so that here, maybe his eyes go a little higher. And then the head could, at this last frame here, I would probably have the head start to come up, right? And the neck does this scooping up motion. And then here, maybe this one is a little higher still, so that you lead a little bit more into this movement with the head, so it doesn't pop as much. But the body can stay the same. I like that the body is still, and then you have an explosion. But I think the head could probably lead that a bit more. And then you can do little things like, so this hand I think comes off the ground first, because this one is still bent a little bit. So in the next pose, I would actually have you have this one going first. That's fine too. You know, I think in this pose it'd be nice that the hand that is coming up first, which judging from these poses, it's his right hand, that would probably be a little bit more have a slightly bent elbow and be slightly higher. And then the other one, you know, you can drop his shoulder and you can stretch this one out a little bit to see where it came from, even though now it's kind of doing the same thing as the feet. I don't know, maybe what you have is okay, but just so you never have full asymmetry in the limbs, you know, because here I can see that both the arms are delayed from each other, which is good. This is great. I love what you did with the tail. The wings feel good too. If you can, let's see. No, it's actually okay. I was thinking, if possible, if you could bring this webbing down a little bit so that the wing looks a little bit more compact. You know, it's very bulgy there, but that's actually okay. Yeah, this is nice. Like these shapes are what I'm talking about. You know, these are really, they really feel like a wing on the way up. That is cool. That's good. Let's see if I can notice anything else. That's cool. Yeah, this is all really nice. Great job with the limbs. They feel so much more clear, and also like I feel like this foot probably still is a bit slow motion on the way down, but not a big deal. So there's one, I think this is all great. This is so playful and lovely and really cool. The one thing I mentioned earlier where he feels this one feels too fast to me. The way he snaps down here and comes up and stands. If I play that at speed, this is good. Boink! It feels like it feels like it's playing in what's it called? Fast motion, the opposite of slow motion. It feels like it's playing too fast, like fast forward, I think is the word. Boink doink, you know, that I would add a few frames in there. Probably, this is probably good. This hang time up here is probably fine, but the way he comes through here, you know, there's barely any weight on the way down, so I'd probably add a frame or two here in that section. And then also for this hang time, it feels like he's jumping up and then boink, you know, he's almost being pulled down to that rock. So I'd probably also add a frame or so, or frame or two somewhere here to just give him enough weight. Yeah, it's just this donk donk, you know, that is very fast. But what he's doing is all great. And I love that we can now see both of the eyes. I didn't even know that. Didn't even think that you would adjust that. That's really cool. Neck feels great. You know, this is way nicer. Look at that. Like, this is so much nicer than what you had before, posing wise. I feel like you could probably have his arms. What is this arm doing? You can probably have this hand here. Let me use white again. This hand could probably come in more so that it's planting a little bit closer underneath his body. Maybe there, then you would see the back feet as well, the back foot. And you could probably pull this one in a little bit as well. Maybe like that, or maybe less than that. Just so he doesn't stand quite as far apart, even though there's something to that, but just to keep that lizardy feel, you know. And then you replant the hands. I think that's good. So yeah, because then, you know, if you have this hand more over here, then you actually have a change as he's planting it over a little bit, and it's not going from more or less the same place to more or less the same place. And if it was me, I would probably plant this back foot not quite as far out. I would do something more like that. And this is a terrible drawing of a foot, but you get the idea. I think it's kind of odd that he slides so far out and the leg is straight all the time. And then he only pushes off for like a frame or two. You know, it feels a little bit weird. Let me quickly mention, here you could probably lead a bit more with the head, where the head could dive down so that it's more of a diving and then coming up again. Head feels a bit stiff there. Now this flap feels a bit off to me here, where he's flapping down, like he's flapping down with his hands, and the back of the wing is so far up. You know, usually it's more of a swooping motion that comes down and forward. So I think here, this would probably look a little bit better if the wing came a little bit more forward like that. So you had more of an arc like that for the wing. and you don't drag it as much. Like this would be a little bit more of a regular downbeat pose, you know, where this is not as low and this is not as high. I think that would work better. And then on the way up, you know, here, this would be lower somewhere here, and the shape would be a little bit more like that. I think that would be nicer. Something like that. You could play with something in between, and it would lead a little bit more into this, where these guys would be lower, you know, and the whole wing would have more of this shape. And here too. You might be able to show the wing hand over here and have this a bit more like that. And this here, this would be the underside, something like that. Yeah, and here it's a similar thing for the upbeat. Like this is not how a wing goes up, you know, where it kind of pops backwards and it's almost leading here, and this is lower. You know, this pose should be different, and I think it's going to feel a lot more natural the way it comes up, you know, and where it would be, the wing hand would be higher, but then the wing itself would see some of the top. Man, this is hard to draw from this angle, but basically something like that, where it's folded, sort of halfway folded. The tips are dragging, and you know, and it's this idea. It's hard to do for me. I'm gonna dislocate my shoulder. Yeah, it's not quite right, but you know, and then it contracts, goes up, extends. So here it would extend, and you can clear the silhouette of his horn by having the wing hand here. You know, this is sort of almost extended, and only the top is still dragging, and then he goes down again. Yeah, and this double flap is really nice. Oh, now I remember I told you to do something more with the tail when you played it at speed. It's probably maybe a little overkill, but I kind of like it. You know, maybe you could think about reducing the amount that the tail swings over, but I like the idea that it's not just dragging behind there, but it's actually involved in the physicality. Okay, we're already over time, so let me make sure I don't miss anything. Talked about the flaps. Okay, I've got to have a few more notes. Talked about the wing shapes here. Make them more bird-like. You know, you want to get away from this kind of idea, where that doesn't feel like this wing would be. It would have more of a shape like that, where here, this is the wing hand, and then you have this. You have these guys. More rounded, you know, and this whole thing is bulged like that, something like that, and then here is where it's attached. Usually it looks nicer. Upbeat at 200. Yeah, we talked about that, and again, this is not quite correct. I think this probably has to be more forward, and it's been a while that I've actually drawn wing feedback, so I'm not as fit anymore with these drawings. But something like this, a more typical upbeat, I would say, would be more appealing and more fluid as well. We talked about the wings locking a bit here, so this should be more like one flap, flap up, you know, and it shouldn't pause in between. Let's see. Oh yeah, so this is for the legs, you know, where here you have this kind of starting to push off pose. And on the next frame, it kind of just stays the same, but the legs stretch. So this one should be a real, almost straight leg, and you would actually see the underside of the foot with the toes leaving the ground, you know, something like this would be, I don't know if his foot looks like that, but it would be more like that, you know, actually peeling off the ground. Same for the other foot. Make it straighter, almost straight, and then you see his toes actually, whoops. You see his toes actually pushing off the ground, you know, and here is his heel. Something like that. So you really get this, and then kicks off. And then it's going to work really nicely into this pose. Yeah, legs are nice. These look awkward. But this is the rig. There's not too much you can do about these poses. Here the wing pops a little bit. You can probably find a better in between. All the ending feels really nice. Like you did a great job with these hands. They feel super organic. The way he pushes off, it's playful and it has nice energy. This foot is slightly floaty, the way it comes forward. I'm almost done. Oh, you could probably, I think here you might be able. This wing, I think, to me is hugging the silhouette too much. Like I would keep it. You know, I would keep it more visible, something like that, or I would hide it behind the body. You know, I would tend to have it more visible. So this should be higher, and here I would still show it a little bit wherever it is, you know, with the spikes. And then here it's fine if it goes behind the body, but I would also drag these guys to make a really nice transition. And in here, it could be lower and also more curved. So something more like that. Cool. Yes. Yeah, and this is nice. And I think the ending, I love the way he comes around. There's one thing here where the head pops a little bit, right there. And I think the way you do that, right now he goes from this pose to that pose. The way you can do that is you start here and then you rotate, don't translate, and then you translate and rotate. So you have one frame where it's mostly rotation, kind of leading in, and then you displace the head. Then it doesn't pop, you know, like dunk. It's a little too, because then you lose weight. But this is great. I love the way he comes around. I love that we can see both eyes. Wings are nice, hand is nice. Very cool. Tail looks great. Man, great work. I think oh, and last thing, I think you can probably tighten the spacing of this foot just ever so slightly. It feels a little drifty. You know, like it's a little too even, I guess. But man, congrats on polishing this. I think you did a great job. I hope you know, this might have been a little chaotic, but I only made a few notes this time. You could talk about these wing shapes forever, and it's a shot like this is never fully done. But I think, considering this is a rig from the internet, you know, you brought it to a really nice place. I think the biggest things for me would be that one place where it feels too fast. You know, it's almost like action, action, action. It's a little bit of fast motion, and then it's regular motion again, but should be fairly easy to fix. And then, you know, polish as much as you want to. Like, you could put this on a reel as is for sure, and it's going to be a really nice demo piece because it shows so many different things: quadruped, flaps, you know, uneven terrain, contrast in timing. You know, you have some character in there, you have some like some animal behavior, you have tail overlap. So there's a lot of skills you can show with a piece like this, which is fantastic. So I would say, you know, as long as you still have motivation, keep polishing what you can see. And yeah, and then I'm sure that this will help you in the future on your demo reel. Okay, thanks for resubmitting and really nice work. Talk to you later.